Welcome to the Internet Chess Club. This is Grandmaster Miguel Illescas, and we are here to analyze Game 3 of the World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and young Nepomniachtchi. Today it was the Russian who was playing with the white pieces, and as it happens usually in this kind of encounters, we saw the same moves which were played in Game 1. Precisely the Ruy Lopez variation. And if you're interested to know the details of these moves, I recommend you to watch the analysis of Game 1, where we were going deep into the different possibilities around these open games. Today the deviation came on move 8. They were playing the same moves, and at this point on Game 1 h3 was played, and it came the strong novelty or not so well-known idea, knight a5. This took by surprise more or less to the Russian player, and the game was a draw, very equal all the time. So for today's game the options were basically to go for the martial attack c3, which we know now that Magnus pretends to play d5. This is the move order with castle, which allows black to play d5 with just one move. And okay, we know this gambit. We were talking a bit on the first day, the analysis of the Game 1, that white gets a clear pawn up, but black gets fantastic initiative, enough pawn to play. According to modern theory, the position is balanced. So white is trying to wait to play c3, trying to make some useful move. h3 didn't work, so today he tried the second main weapon for the anti-martial, a4. After this move, white is threatening to take on b5. The rook is unprotected, so black has to do something about it. One of the main moves, it was played today, bishop b7, makes a lot of sense. Black develops a piece, and he protects his rook from a8. But after bishop b7, white played d3, and this is very typical. You have to remember this strategical idea, which is quite important for the Ruy Lopez. When the bishop is on b7, white plays d3, and somehow the pawn on e4 is killing the activity of the black bishop, and white expects his bishop to be stronger on the play on the king side. In many lines where black plays instead of bishop b7, he plays d6, the bishop may go through e6, and in that way black can trade bishops. This happened very often in the Italian game, okay? But today, after bishop b7 d3, it came d6, and now we can see that for black it's too late to bring the bishop to e6. It's already committed to b7. In exchange, white is playing very slow, because usually white tries to play d4 very fast, but here this is not going to work, because with the bishop on b7, the pressure on e4 would be very fast and very strong. That's why white plays Gyoko piano, knight bd2, with the idea to transfer the knight to f1 and sometimes to e3. Sometimes it can also go to g3. In the game, move 10, black was thinking, Carlsen was taking his time. He was not so prepared to meet this line, and after some thought he played rook e8. It's a very natural move, typical of the Ruy Lopez with black pieces. Black pretends to regroup bishop to f8 and get a very safe position on the king side, and of course to make some activity for the rook, which would start working on the center. Especially if white plays at one point d4, the rook will be already making some pressure on e4, and at the same time also black one day may play d5, and the rook will be protecting the pawn on e5. So e8 is a typical square for the rook in these lines. But the main line was knight a5. This is also a very normal way to play for black in the Ruy Lopez after bishop a2 c5. Black gets space advantage with these 3 pawns, and the game goes on. I mean, there is some theory here. Probably Magnus, maybe he got a bit worried that Nepo may be very well prepared to meet the main line, and that's why he went for a secondary move like rook e8, which is perfectly okay according to well, I mean, to my knowledge. White has here the opportunity to go knight g5. Nepo didn't play this move. Why? First of all, because if black comes back, rook f8, the pressure is on f7, of course. If black goes back with rook f8, it's difficult to improve the knight on g5. It will have to come back to f3. And somehow there are not so many useful moves here because black wants to play knight d4. So probably white's best move is knight f3. And then it's like, this is very typical in some other lines of the Ruy Lopez. And it was a way for grandmasters to make a friendly draw very often, repeating moves, knight g5, rook f8, knight f3 back, and shaking hands. But okay, another point is that after knight g5, black has an extra opportunity to play d5, which is interesting because it's a kind of temporary gambit, because after pawn takes, knight takes, it's impossible because knight f7, and this is a very strong idea, take, check, and after king e6, the position becomes incredibly dangerous for black. In fact, black is probably lost if white plays well here, maybe c4, and the attack is incredibly strong. But okay, the idea is after d5, pawn takes, knight d4. This is the gambit's idea, and the knight starts to attack on b3, and maybe black gets a very decent position, sacrificing a pawn but getting the pair of bishops. It's quite promising. Anyway, after rook e8, it came knight f1, and now Magnus decided to stop forever. Knight g5, played h6, which is very natural. White also develops bishop d2, controlling a5, so there is no more the move knight a5. And at this point, black played bishop f8. I would say this is the end of the opening. I mean, both sides have done the standard moves, and now white needs to find out a plan. What is the way to play here? It's not easy. There are not so many games. In fact, after bishop f8, one of the players who was doing well in this line, I mean, well, he was trying, not doing so well because he was facing very strong opposition. It's Vladislav Kachiev, the Russian-French grandmaster. And he lost with Garry Kasparov in a rapid game in 2001. The game went c4. In fact, c4 is a quite principal move. There are a couple of games of Kachiev where he's losing against Kasparov, and also with Grishuk, same year, 2001. But of course, c4, it's not the only way to play. There is another very natural move which was played by Nepo, knight e3. I am not sure this was his preparation, because they were already thinking quite a lot. Knight e3 is very natural. The knight goes to the center. And next move for black was not so obvious, but quite logical according to the situation. Magnus was thinking for a while, and he played knight e7. He's controlling white's knight, the main squares d5, f5, and at the same time he's ready to jump to g6 in a very typical maneuver, and also he's giving free way to the pawn on c7, which can go to c6 or c5 to reinforce the control of the center from black's point of view. After knight e7, white has to find a constructive way to continue, and he went with the standard idea c4, the same move like Kasparov and Grishuk played one move before. After c4, black is giving a choice. I mean, he can try to keep. There was one game of Kachiev, Asrian versus Kachiev, also in year 2001, where the French player went c6, and it was a draw after a few moves, take, 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 take. They were changing everything. But okay, the general feeling is that maybe white should be slightly better for the reason we mentioned before. I mean, the white bishop on b3 is a bit better than the bishop on a8, and at the same time the knight on e3 is slightly better than the knight on e7. So the position is very symmetrical and pretty equal, but white is slightly better, no question about it. So that's why after c4, Magnus went b takes c4. This is much more natural And in fact, it will bring a structure which is slightly better for black after knight takes c4. This was played in the game. And black now has a chain of 6 pawns versus a chain of 5 pawns. Usually, when talking about pawn structure, a good guide to understand when a pawn structure is good is the longer, the better. I mean, in this case, black has also a very interesting possibility to make pressure on the b file. It will be not so easy for white to use the c line with the same effectivity. We will see very soon. There was still one game here, Arahamia Yildiz tournament for women in 2010. It was rook b8, and this was allowing a trick, a threat, let's say. White played very well, sacrificing a piece on e5. Knight takes e5, pawn takes, and knight takes e5. This is pretty interesting because now f7 is under attack, and black is in some trouble here. I mean, in that game, black played king h7, and white was already ahead on material with bishop f7, taking a third pawn and very soon to exchange. So white is better here. Computer is offering a clever move, knight e d5, but still white is probably better here after e takes d5, bishop d5. It's true black is getting some compensation, but after take, bishop c3, it's not less true than white is a clear pawn up. Compensation, yes, but pawn is there. So probably this is too risky for black, and Magnus quite fast, he went knight c6, and in that way he's protecting all tricks. The knight comes back to control very important squares like d4, like a5, and Nepo reacted with a natural idea, rook c1, improving the position of his rook, and in that way after rook c1, let's see here, rook c1, in that way all white pieces are now very active. Black still needs to do something about his rook, but Magnus played controlling the queen side with a5. This is a natural move, and somehow he's getting a slight advantage strategically on the queen side, where this pawn, a5, is stopping 2 white pawns. So in the endgame, it could be an advantage, but at the same time, we can see that in the middle game, there is some pressure on a5, and black will have to be very careful, will need to be very careful not to lose this pawn. Now it's difficult to find out strong ideas for both sides, so they play little moves improving the position, like this bishop c3. There are some ideas with queen d2 maybe, and at the same time maybe sometimes white can pretend to play d4. In fact, this was what happened in the game after black move. He went bishop c8, allowing d4. Of course, another moves are possible, but really white is slightly better in this position. If knight b4, this is a bad mistake. Can you see why? Yes. Well, it's pretty simple tactics. Knight takes a5. White would be winning a pawn. So always try to be careful when crossing the border, the middle line, which if you dare to cross it, you have to be always ready to meet some annoying threats on your pieces, like in this case. The move bishop c8 makes a lot of sense because now the bishop wants to go to e6. Do you remember we were talking about it at the opening when Magnus played bishop b7 d3, and now he's coming back to trying to get the best square for this bishop on e6 to meet the power of the white, the real open, the Spanish bishop. Well, in this moment, I believe Nepo played in the best way. He used the opportunity to break on the center after d4. He's getting some advantage, I would say, some slight space advantage. Look at that. The move is practically forcing black to take. Then we have exchange of pieces. And of course black now improves his bishop, and white gets some annoyment ping. The knight cannot freely move. If knight a5, then black has the move c5. Suddenly there are some ideas here, and if queen d2 to protect the knight, then black can simply take the pawn back with bishop b3, knight b3, and rook a4, or even a stronger knight e4. So white cannot really take on a5. It's not a good idea. And Nepo was thinking a lot here, what to do. And in my opinion, this was his only mistake in the game. Can you think what to do here? It's a strategical difficult question, I understand. You can tell me you don't get paid enough to work so hard in this position. Probably true. It's a difficult question. I mean, the computer is showing the best move, but we need to understand why is it good. It's not so easy to understand. Nepo played a normal prophylactic move h3, but with this move he's losing his advantage. With h3 now black equalized in a very precise way. We will see it later. Well, in fact, I can show you now because it's important. After h3, Magnus played c6, which is a move which has two ideas. First of all, the queen is also now protecting a5, and at the same time black is preparing to break on d5 in better conditions. And after c6, bishop c2, d5, and here if pawn takes, queen takes, and the position becomes pretty equal. One important thing to consider here is that after take, knight takes, bishop takes a5, black can, well, he gets compensation with bishop b4, but probably he can try even more with some moves like this, and suddenly all white pieces are hanging, and this can become really nasty for white. So he has to be careful when taking this pawn on a5. Let's go back to the move after bishop e6. In this movement, move 21, I think this was the only chance in the game for Nepo to keep pressing. With the move queen d3, it's a difficult move. What is the idea? Well, I don't know. No, I mean, it's not so obvious. I mean, I had to work a bit to understand. One of the points is that white wants to play bishop c2 and to have the battery with bishop and queen with some ideas to h7. Let's see, if black plays c6, like in the game, then we can go bishop c2. We didn't spend this tempi, h3, which is not useful at all in this position. And if black now plays d5, then now this is going to show its power. We can take on f6, queen f6, take on d5, and make this blow, queen h7 mate. So black has to do something else, of course. Maybe in this moment after bishop f6, the only move is to take on c4, but then after queen d8, black is losing exchange, and white is clearly better. That's why d5 is a mistake. In this move order, black cannot play c6, d5, and after bishop c2, maybe he can try something else, but okay, computer is offering bishop c4, but okay, white is simply better after queen c4, two bishops, without any compensation. And also computer is offering g6, but okay, this is getting everything very weak. All black pawns are vulnerable, and in fact white has already maybe some direct tactics with knight takes d6, and maybe white is getting some advantage here. So, well, after queen d3, c6, bishop c2, the position is already better for white. So maybe black has to find something else here after queen d3. Let's try to find an improvement for black. What can be suggested here? We can try, for example, move like rook b8. It looks active because after rook b8, the bishop is under attack. But again, we play bishop c2, and the rook on b8 is doing really nothing, and now a5 is weak, and white is better. So what else? I mean, another possible move, maybe knight d7. I was thinking knight d7, trying to jump to c5. But all the time the same idea, bishop c2, and after knight c5, queen d4. And here again, a5 is weak, and all white pieces are very well placed on the center. White is, I would say, better. I don't know how much better, but really nice position for white. So queen d3 was really posing a big challenge for black. And according to my analysis, maybe the best idea would be to break immediately on d5. But this is not an easy move to make, because black is giving a pawn. I mean, after bishop takes, queen takes, pawn takes, and white is a pawn up. Of course, there is some compensation. I have to admit that bishop b4, but okay, rook d1, and well, it's nice to play this position with a pawn up. I mean, of course, I said there is some compensation, but this would be the way to make some pressure. But for Nepo, he didn't find it. He went h3, and after c6, the game was pretty equal. You will see. After d5, Nepo tried e5. We will see it will bring to an endgame where he's very, very slightly better, but really nothing. Because after bishop b4, take, it's 5 versus 5. It's true these are double pawns, but the king is very active, and this pawn on a4 can be weak sometimes in some bishop endgame. It's a very important pawn, and white will not be in time to use his majority on the king's side. We will see. First, he has to pay attention to some rook d2. That's why he went king f1. One possibility, bishop e4, was possible, but then, okay, we see that the double pawns, black gets rid of the double pawns, and the game becomes immediately equal. So after king f1, rook b8, and now the players both knew that this was going to be a draw very soon. In fact, they were playing here quite fast. The game is dead draw. They played a bit. Nepo is already showing that he's happy with the draw, moving his bishop. The position is completely blockaded, and we can see that the pawn doesn't really play a role. White cannot use really the pawn. I mean, if g4, black can simply pass here. He doesn't need to do anything, simply move the bishop, bishop d7, bishop c6, and white cannot make any progress here. And if g3, it's more or less the same. I mean, black can take and simply stay here, and there is really nothing white can do to improve this position. I mean, it's a completely equal endgame. So in the game, after king f6, h4, they were repeating moves, and finally on move 41, Nepo offered the draw, which was immediately accepted by Magnus Carlsen. All in all, 3 draws. We have already 17 draws in a row in the World Championship final match. If we count 12 from Caruana, 3 from this match, and the last 2 games of the Carlsen final some years ago. So it shows that chess today at this level is very perfect. It's very difficult to get an advantage. It's very, very difficult to win a game if both players play solid like today. And we will have to wait for some other exciting battles. At least they are fighting. I mean, it's clear, nothing to blame to the players. It's simply that they play too well, and it's very difficult then to see big mistakes. In all these 3 games, I believe the only moment where a player could get a very interesting advantage was when Nepo missed the move queen g7 in yesterday's game, with the black pieces at one moment. After queen c2, g6, b takes c3, he took on a4, he could play queen g7, and according to modern computers, that would bring black a huge advantage in the long term. Missed opportunity, but now it's 1.5. Tomorrow Magnus will have the advantage of the white pieces, and don't forget to come back to Internet Chess Club to see what move by move the analysis of the 4th game. See you then. Bye bye.